The wind came screaming down from the Montana highlands, like something alive, slamming into Nathan Cole's cabin with a fury that rattled the windows and shook the beams he had cut with his own hands. Snow spun sideways through the darkness, erasing the trail to the river and swallowing the world beyond a few feet. No man traveled in weather like this. No animal survived long in it either. Nathan stood near the iron stove, rifle within reach, when the sound reached him, soft at first, almost lost beneath the howl of the storm. Then it came again, a knock, weak, desperate, real. His body went still. Whoever stood outside his door was either dying or already should have been. Hope you enjoyed this story. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear where you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Nathan Cole moved slowly, every instinct sharpened by years of surviving alone in the Montana wilderness. He lifted the lantern from its hook, its light throwing long shadows across the single-room cabin, his bed neatly made, his late wife's quilt folded at the foot, tools lined with careful order along the wall. Order mattered when a man lived alone. Order kept you alive. The knock came a third time, weaker than before. Nathan opened the door just enough to keep the wind from tearing it off its hinges. Snow exploded inside like white smoke. A figure stood on the porch, barely upright, hunched against the storm. She was small, wrapped in a thin coat stiff with ice, her hair plastered to her face, her gloved hands clutching a carpet bag as if it were the last solid thing left in the world. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking apart in the wind. "Help me." Nathan didn't ask her name. He didn't ask where she came from. Out here, questions came after survival. He grabbed her arm, too thin, even through the frozen wool, and pulled her inside. The door slammed shut behind them, and for a moment the cabin rang with the sound of the storm trying to claw its way in. She collapsed to her knees. Nathan knelt beside her, already shrugging off her coat, his movements brisk but careful. Her skin was icy beneath his fingers, her lips pale, her breathing shallow and uneven. "Easy," he said, his voice low and steady. "You're safe. I've got you." He fed wood into the stove until the iron glowed red, then wrapped her in a blanket, setting her close enough to the heat to thaw without shocking her body. When he turned back, she was shivering violently, her teeth clicking like glass. "My name is Clara," she said, barely audible. "Clara Whitmore." Nathan poured coffee, holding the cup himself when her hands shook too badly to manage it. He watched her sip, watched the color return slowly to her face. "Why were you out in this storm?" he asked, not unkindly. She swallowed hard. "I came west to marry a man." Nathan's jaw tightened, though he said nothing. "Silas Granger," she continued. "He sent for me, a mail-order arrangement. When I arrived in Livingston, he took one look at me and said he'd changed his mind." Nathan knew the name. Everyone in the valley did. Granger owned half the grazing land within a day's ride. A hard man. A powerful one. "He paid my fare back to town," Clara said, her voice steadier now, anger lending it strength. "But the boarding house wouldn't take me without money. The station master said the next coach east wouldn't come for a week. I thought I could walk to a ranch I'd seen on the map. I didn't know the storm would come so fast." Nathan looked at her frozen boots, the hem of her dress stiff with ice. She wouldn't have lasted another hour. "You're lucky," he said quietly. She met his eyes. "I don't feel lucky." Nathan stood and checked the door latch, then the shutters. The wind hammered them again, but the cabin held. He had built it to. "This is my place," he said. "You can stay until the weather clears. No charge, no expectations." Clara looked around the room. The clean floor, the simple table, the Bible on the shelf, the care evident in every corner. "I can work," she said quickly. "Cook, clean, mend. I won't be a burden." Nathan shook his head once. "You're a person who nearly froze to death. That's reason enough." She nodded, emotion flickering across her face before she could stop it. That night, Nathan gave her the bed and took the buffalo robe for himself, settling near the stove. The storm raged on, but inside the cabin, the worst of it was held at bay. Clara slept fitfully at first, murmuring in her dreams, her hands curled tight as if still gripping that carpet bag. Nathan lay awake, staring into the fire. He knew trouble when it knocked on his door, and trouble had a way of following men like Silas Granger. Morning came slowly. The wind eased, though snow still fell thick and heavy. Nathan rose before dawn, rebuilt the fire, and set biscuits to bake. When Clara woke, the smell alone brought tears to her eyes. "You don't have to stay close to the stove today," he said without turning. "You'll warm up soon enough." She watched him move around the cabin, strong and quiet, a man shaped by long winters and hard choices. For the first time since leaving the East, her chest didn't feel so tight it hurt to breathe. Over the next days, the storm trapped them together. They fell into a rhythm neither of them named. Clara cooked with what little Nathan had stored. She mended his shirts, her hands quick and practiced. Nathan split wood, checked his cattle when the weather allowed, and showed her how to bank the fire so it would last through the night. They spoke in small pieces at first, about her life as a school teacher in Ohio, about his years alone since his wife's passing. They didn't touch, not really, but the space between them grew charged with something unspoken. On the fourth day, Clara stood at the window, watching snow drift down in lazy spirals. "What happens when the road's clear?" she asked. Nathan didn't answer right away. He knew the answer mattered. "Then you decide what comes next," he said finally. "Not him, not anyone else." She nodded, though uncertainty clouded her eyes. Nathan didn't know it yet, but Silas Granger hadn't forgotten the woman he'd discarded. And when the storm finally loosened its grip on the valley, the real danger would begin. Not from the cold, but from a man who believed people were things he could claim. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside the cabin by the Yellowstone, two lives had already begun to shift, quietly, irrevocably, toward a future neither of them had planned, but both would soon be forced to defend. Morning settled over the valley with a pale, uncertain light, the kind that followed a hard storm and left the world quiet as if it were holding its breath. Nathan Cole stepped outside before the sun fully cleared the ridge, his boots crunching through fresh snow. The river lay hidden beneath a skin of ice, steam rising where the current fought through. Winter still owned this land, but it had loosened its grip just enough to remind him that survival came one day at a time. Inside the cabin, Clara Whitmore woke slowly, disoriented by warmth. For a moment she expected the narrow bed in a Boston boarding house, the sound of wagons and voices below. Instead, she smelled coffee and wood smoke, and the memory of the storm returned in pieces. She sat up, pulling the quilt around her shoulders, listening to the steady sounds of a man moving with purpose. Nathan returned with an armful of wood, nodding once when he saw her awake. He set the logs by the stove and poured coffee without asking. They ate in companionable silence, biscuits broken open with practiced hands. Clara realized she had not eaten like this since leaving home, without fear that the next meal might not come. As the day unfolded, the storm revealed what it had buried. Snow stood high along the fence lines, and drifts blocked the path to the barn. Nathan worked steadily, shoveling, breaking ice, checking his cattle when the weather allowed. Clara insisted on helping, despite his protests. She swept, organized shelves, and stitched a tear in his coat, with thread so fine the repair nearly disappeared. In quiet moments, she watched him. Nathan spoke little, but when he did, his words were chosen carefully, as if wasted ones offended him. He noticed everything. The way she favored her left foot after the cold. The way she flinched at sudden noises. He never commented, but he adjusted his movements, softened his steps. By the second evening, conversation came more easily. Clara spoke of her students, of chalk-dusted hands and recitations that echoed in her memory. Teaching had given her purpose, a way to be useful in a world that expected little from unmarried women. Nathan listened, leaning back in his chair, eyes fixed on the fire. He told her of the ranch, of winters that took cattle and summers that nearly broke a man with work. He did not speak of his wife, but her presence lingered in the quilt, in the careful order of the cabin. On the third morning, a knock sounded at the door, not frantic, familiar. Nathan stiffened, then relaxed when he opened it to reveal Eleanor Finch, bundled in wool and resolve. The older woman took one look at Clara and smiled gently, as if she had been expecting her all along. "I brought stew," Eleanor said, stepping inside without ceremony. "Storm like that always leaves folks hungry." Clara thanked her, embarrassed by the kindness. Eleanor studied her openly, sharp eyes softened by sympathy. She asked no questions that Clara was not ready to answer, but her presence made it clear that word traveled fast in a small valley. When Eleanor left, she squeezed Nathan's arm. "You did right," she said quietly. That afternoon, the sky darkened again, though no snow fell. Clara felt the weight of uncertainty press in. She knew men like Silas Granger did not easily release what they believed belonged to them. The thought tightened her chest. That night, the cold returned with a vengeance. The stove struggled to keep up, and the walls snapped as the temperature dropped. Clara tried to hide her shivering, but Nathan noticed. Without comment, he brought another robe and sat beside her on the bed, careful to keep distance while sharing warmth. The arrangement was practical, nothing more, but her heartbeat betrayed her. She slept, leaning against his shoulder. Nathan stayed awake, staring into the dark. He told himself this was temporary, that storms passed and roads cleared, yet some instinct warned him that what had entered his cabin that night would not leave unchanged. In the days that followed, the valley began to stir. Tracks appeared on the trail. Smoke rose from distant chimneys. With each sign of returning life, tension crept back into the space between them. Clara knew she would soon have to choose a path, and Nathan knew that whichever path she chose would bring trouble. On the fifth morning, Clara stood at the door, staring toward the road that led to Livingston. "If he comes," she said softly, "I don't want to hide." Nathan met her gaze. "You won't have to," he said. Neither of them said Silas Granger's name, but it hung between them, heavy and unavoidable. The storm had passed, but its consequences were only beginning to show. The first sign of trouble came with the sound of hooves on packed snow, sharp and deliberate, cutting through the quiet of the valley. Nathan Cole heard it before he saw it. He was mending a broken latch on the barn door when the rhythm reached him. Wrong somehow, too purposeful to belong to a neighbor checking cattle. Clara heard it too. She stood just outside the cabin shaking out a rug and froze. Her breath caught in her throat. Horses. More than one. Nathan straightened slowly, his shoulders tightening. He did not reach for his rifle, but his hand hovered close, the way it always did when instinct whispered caution. He stepped toward the cabin, his gaze fixed on the trail that curved down from the ridge. 3 riders emerged from the pale haze of cold air. At the center rode a tall man in a dark coat, his posture relaxed, almost smug, as though the land itself bent to make room for him. Clara recognized him at once. Her fingers clenched around the rug until her knuckles burned. Silas Granger had come. He reined in just short of the cabin, boots swinging down with practiced ease. The other 2 men stayed mounted, flanking him like shadows. Silas tipped his hat, his smile thin and performative. "Cole," he called. "Heard you've been entertaining company." Nathan stepped forward, placing himself squarely between Silas and the cabin door. "This is private land," he said evenly. "State your business and be on your way." Silas chuckled, as if amused by a child's stubbornness. "My business is standing right behind you." The cabin door opened before Nathan could stop her. Clara stepped out into the cold, her spine straight despite the tremor running through her. She wore a simple blue dress Eleanor Finch had lent her, mended and clean, her hair pinned neatly back. She looked nothing like the half-frozen woman Silas had discarded at the station. "I'm here," Clara said. "Say what you came to say." Silas's eyes raked over her, assessing, calculating. "You belong with me," he said flatly, "under the agreement you signed." Nathan felt heat rise in his chest, but he kept his voice steady. "That agreement was ended. You know it." Silas's smile vanished. "That's not how it works. A man doesn't send for a wife just to have her wander off." Clara stepped closer to Nathan, close enough that he could feel the cold radiating from her coat. "You ended it," she said, her voice firm. "You gave me papers. You paid my fare back. You left me with nothing." Silas turned his head slightly. "You could have waited." "And died?" Clara asked. "Because that storm would have killed me." One of the mounted men shifted uncomfortably. The other kept his eyes down. Silas waved them off, annoyed. "You're dramatic," Silas said. "Always were." Nathan took one step forward. "That's enough." Silas's gaze snapped to him, sharp now. "Careful, Cole. Harboring a woman under contract isn't looked on kindly. Sheriff Walsh might have questions." The words were measured, but the threat beneath them was clear. Nathan knew Silas did not bluff lightly. Men like him preferred pressure that looked like law. "You're free to bring the sheriff," Nathan said. "You'll find nothing here that belongs to you." Silas's jaw tightened. For a moment, the air between them felt stretched thin enough to tear. Snow creaked under shifting boots. Horses stamped, sensing tension. Finally, Silas smiled again, slow and cold. "This isn't finished," he said. "You'll hear from me." He mounted his horse with a fluid motion and signaled the others to follow. As they rode away, Clara's knees nearly buckled. Nathan turned just in time to steady her, his hands firm on her arms. "You all right?" he asked quietly. She nodded, though her face had gone pale. "He won't stop." "No," Nathan agreed. "He won't." That evening, Clara sat at the table, sorting beans into a bowl she didn't need to sort. Her thoughts spiraled, every fear she had buried clawing back to the surface. Nathan moved around the cabin, closing shutters, checking the door twice. "I don't want this to become your fight," Clara said finally. Nathan paused. It already is. She looked up at him, startled by the certainty in his tone. He met her gaze without flinching. He had lived a quiet life for years, but quiet did not mean weak. He knew injustice when it stood on his porch. The next morning, Sheriff Henry Walsh arrived alone. His horse was dusted with snow, his expression carefully neutral. Nathan greeted him at the door while Clara remained inside, listening. "I'm here because Silas Granger made a complaint," Walsh said. "Claims you're keeping a woman from him." Nathan folded his arms. "She's here by choice." Walsh sighed, rubbing his jaw. "I've known Silas a long time. I don't like his ways, but the law is the law. Does she have papers?" Clara stepped forward, holding the folded document she had kept hidden in her bag since the station. Her hands shook, but her voice did not. "He terminated the arrangement," she said. "Here, in writing." Walsh read slowly, his brow furrowing. He looked at Clara, then at Nathan. "This clears you of obligation," he said finally. "Legally." Relief washed through Clara so suddenly she had to sit down. Nathan let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Walsh lingered, uneasy. "That doesn't mean Silas will accept it. The valley talks. You should be prepared." Prepared. The word echoed long after the sheriff left. That night, as darkness settled in, Clara stood at the window, staring out into the snow-dusted valley. "I won't run," she said softly. "Not again." Nathan joined her, his reflection faint in the glass. "Then we'll stand." Outside, the wind picked up, not yet a storm, but restless. Somewhere beyond the ridge, Silas Granger was nursing his anger, and Nathan knew the next move would not come with polite words. The battle ahead would not be fought only with law, but with reputation, fear, and the fragile loyalties of a small community. What had begun as a rescue from the cold had turned into a line drawn in the snow. The valley changed after Silas Granger rode away. It was subtle at first, like a shift in the wind that only a careful person would notice. Neighbors who once waved from horseback now nodded without stopping. Conversations paused when Clara entered the general store with Eleanor Finch. Eyes followed her, curious, speculative, some openly judgmental. Nathan noticed everything. He said little, but his posture changed when they went into town together. He walked half a step closer to Clara, not touching her, yet clearly placing himself between her and the world. Clara felt the difference and drew strength from it, even as the weight of whispers pressed against her chest. The first open cruelty came 3 days later. A folded paper lay on the cabin porch when Nathan returned from checking fence lines. No name, no signature, just words written in a heavy, deliberate hand. "Loose women bring trouble. Men who shelter them don't fare much better." Nathan crushed the paper in his fist and threw it into the stove. He did not show it to Clara. Some burdens did not need sharing, but trouble had a way of making itself known. At the store that afternoon, the clerk hesitated before handing Clara her change. "Credit's tight," the woman said, though Clara had paid in cash. 2 women near the counter fell silent, eyes sharp with interest. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks, but forced herself to stand straight. Eleanor Finch stepped forward then, placing her basket down with a firm thud. "Funny," she said coolly. "Credit's never been tight when I shop here." The clerk flushed and said no more. Outside, Eleanor squeezed Clara's hand. "Some folks bark loud when they're scared," she said. "Doesn't mean they bite." Still, the nights grew heavier. One evening, Clara found Nathan sitting at the table long after supper, staring at nothing. The lamp cast deep shadows across his face. "You're thinking about him," she said gently. "Yes," Nathan admitted. "And what he'll do next." She took a seat across from him. "I don't want you ruined because of me." Nathan lifted his gaze, steady and unyielding. "You're not the ruin here." The next morning brought unexpected news. Jacob Reed arrived on foot, his hat in his hands, his eyes darting nervously toward the tree line. He was young, barely more than a boy, and Silas Granger's hired hand. "I shouldn't be here," Jacob said quietly. But it didn't sit right. Nathan listened while Jacob spoke in low, hurried sentences. Silas was telling anyone who would listen that Clara had deceived him, that Nathan had stolen what was legally his. He was pressing Sheriff Walsh, hinting at lawsuits and property disputes, stirring old alliances. "He's angry," Jacob said, "and he doesn't lose often." Nathan thanked him and watched as the young man hurried away, shoulders hunched against more than the cold. Clara absorbed the news without panic. Something had hardened in her, forged by betrayal and survival. "If he wants to talk," she said, "then I will speak first." Nathan frowned. "Where?" "At church," Clara answered, "where everyone can hear the same truth at once." Sunday arrived clear and bitterly cold. The church filled early, benches crowded with neighbors hungry for spectacle as much as salvation. Silas Granger sat near the front, arms folded, his confidence radiating outward like a challenge. Nathan and Clara took a seat near the back. After the sermon, Pastor Miller cleared his throat. "Miss Whitmore has asked to address the congregation." A murmur rippled through the room. Clara stood, her heart pounding so loud she feared it might drown her voice. She walked to the front slowly, aware of every eye, every held breath. Nathan watched her go, pride and fear tangled tightly together. She told them everything. She spoke of letters written with promises of partnership and respect, of the journey west fueled by hope, of Silas Granger's dismissal at the station, the paper he thrust into her hands, the storm that nearly claimed her life. She held up the termination document, her fingers steady. "I was abandoned," she said plainly. "Not rejected after marriage, not disobedient, abandoned." Silas stood abruptly. "You twist things." "I speak facts," Clara said, cutting through him. "Mr. Cole saved my life. He asked nothing in return." Silence followed, thick and heavy. Then Eleanor Finch stood. "This woman's taught my granddaughter her letters these past weeks. She's no fraud." Another man rose. "Cole helped me pull my cattle through the drought last year. He's no thief." Not everyone joined them. Some remained seated, lips tight, loyalties unmoved, but the balance shifted. Silas left before the benediction, his boots striking the floor like gunshots. That night, the retaliation came swiftly. A rock crashed through the cabin window, shattering glass across the floor. Clara screamed, instinctively ducking. Nathan was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand, scanning the darkness. No one appeared. The message was clear enough. They cleaned the glass together in silence. Nathan's hands shook with restrained fury. Clara's trembled with delayed fear. "I won't be chased," she said finally. "I won't shrink." Nathan met her gaze. "Then you won't stand alone." The next day, he showed her how to hold the rifle, how to breathe, how to steady her hands. Clara surprised him with her focus. Fear sharpened her, but it did not control her. That night, as the lamp burned low, Nathan spoke the thought that had been circling him for days. "We could marry," he said quietly. "It would blunt his claims." Clara studied his face carefully. Would that be protection, she asked, or truth? Nathan did not answer immediately. Only if it's chosen. She nodded once. Then not yet. Outside, the valley lay quiet, but it was the quiet before a breaking point. Silas Granger had lost ground, but not his hunger for control. The next move would not be words or gossip. It would be fire. The smell reached Nathan before the sound did. Smoke carried wrong on the morning air, sharp and bitter, cutting through the clean cold like a warning that came too late. He was halfway to the barn when he saw it. Orange light licking the gray sky, sparks lifting on the wind like angry fireflies. "Clara!" he shouted, already running. She burst from the cabin moments behind him, shawl half-tied, eyes wide with disbelief. The barn roof was burning fast, flames climbing the dry boards with a hunger that turned Nathan's stomach. This barn had stood through storms and droughts, through years of careful work. Now it screamed as fire devoured it. Nathan grabbed a bucket, then another, shouting toward the neighboring fields. "Fire!" His voice tore through the valley, carried by the same wind that fed the flames. Clara ran not away, but toward the danger. She dropped beside him, filling buckets at the half-frozen trough, her movements quick despite the fear pounding through her chest. She had known, somewhere deep, that Silas Granger would not stop at threats. Still, seeing the proof burned like betrayal made real. Neighbors came running, men with coats thrown over nightclothes, women hauling pails. Someone rang the church bell, its frantic toll echoing across the valley. The fire roared back in answer. Nathan climbed onto the barn's lower roof, dousing flames where he could, smoke stinging his eyes. He could hear cattle lowing in panic inside. Too many, too fast. The roof sagged, a warning groan rolling through the structure. "Get back!" he shouted. The roof collapsed moments later in a shower of sparks and embers, heat blasting outward. Clara stumbled back, coughing, tears streaming down her face from smoke and fury both. She watched the barn fall in on itself, watched years of Nathan's life turn to ash, and yet the cabin still stood. Fire crept toward it along the dry grass, but Clara saw it first. "The ground!" she cried. "Cut it off!" Her voice cut through the chaos. Men hesitated only a second before understanding. They grabbed shovels, hacked at the frozen earth, tore a rough fire break between the burning barn and the cabin. Clara worked beside them, hands blistering, lungs burning, refusing to stop. By the time the fire finally died, the barn was gone. Smoke drifted low and heavy, the air thick with loss. Nathan stood amid the wreckage, shoulders slumped, his face streaked with soot and grief. Sheriff Walsh arrived late, his expression grim. With him came Jacob Reed, pale and shaking. The young man could barely meet Nathan's eyes. "I saw who did it," Jacob said hoarsely. "Silas sent a man, promised him money and work. I tried to stop it." Walsh listened, jaw tight as Jacob spoke. This time there were witnesses. This time the damage was too great to ignore. Silas Granger rode up not long after, his horse stepping calmly through the trampled snow. He looked at the ruins and shrugged. "Accidents happen." No one answered him. The silence of the valley turned against him. A rancher stepped forward. "You burned this place," he said flatly. Another followed. "We won't sell you our land." A third spat into the snow. "Nor our water." Silas's confidence cracked, just enough to show the man beneath. He looked around, searching for allies, and found none. Sheriff Walsh's hand rested on his gun, not threatening, but final. "Get off my land," Nathan said quietly. Silas stared at him a long moment, then turned his horse and rode away, smaller somehow against the wide valley. When the crowd thinned, Clara found Nathan sitting on a fallen beam, staring at nothing. She knelt beside him, soot smudging her hands and dress alike. "I'm sorry," she said, the words inadequate but true. "This is because of me." Nathan shook his head slowly. "This is because of the kind of man he is," he replied, "and because we didn't give him what he wanted." She took his hands then, really took them, feeling the burns and tremors he tried to hide. "We can rebuild," she said. "Not the same, but something." Nathan looked at her, truly looked, and something shifted in his eyes. He saw not a woman he had rescued, but a partner who had stood in the fire with him. That night, neighbors brought food, blankets, quiet offers of help. Eleanor Finch hugged Clara hard, whispering, "You belong here." For the first time, Clara believed it without fear. Later, when the cabin was quiet again, Nathan opened a small wooden box from the shelf. Inside lay a thin gold ring, worn smooth by time. "This was my mother's," he said. "I won't ask you to wear it now, or ever, if you choose not to." Clara closed the box gently. "When we choose," she said. Outside, the valley slept under a sky scrubbed clean by smoke and stars. The barn was gone, but the line had been crossed. The fire had burned away doubt, leaving only truth. What remained would have to be faced together. Spring arrived quietly, almost apologetically, as if the valley feared to disturb what had already endured so much. Snow retreated from the lower fields first, revealing dark earth and stubborn shoots of green. The air softened. Birds returned. Life, persistent and patient, moved forward. Nathan Cole worked from dawn until dusk, repairing fences, clearing debris, and planning what would come next. The loss of the barn still ached, but it no longer hollowed him out. Help came without asking. Neighbors arrived with lumber, tools, and wordless resolve. No one mentioned Silas Granger. His name had lost its power. Clara worked beside them all. She organized meals, tended scrapes and burns, and brought calm where there had been panic. Children followed her, drawn by her gentle authority. Before long, she was teaching lessons at Eleanor Finch's kitchen table, chalk tapping against slate while sunlight streamed through the window. Purpose settled into her bones again. One afternoon, Sheriff Walsh rode up alone. He spoke plainly. Silas Granger had sold his holdings and left the territory under pressure that did not need official words. There would be no trial, no apology, just absence. "That's how it ends sometimes," Walsh said. "Not with justice, with quiet." Nathan nodded. Quiet would do. That evening, Nathan found Clara by the riverbank, sleeves rolled, her shoes discarded beside her. She watched the water move steadily beneath thinning ice. "I used to think survival was enough," she said, without turning. "Now I know it's only the beginning." He joined her, close enough to feel her warmth without touching. "You've already built something here," he said, "with or without me." She smiled softly. "Not without you." The words settled between them, honest and unforced. Weeks passed. The valley healed. A temporary barn rose where the old one had stood, built with many hands. Laughter returned to the land. One morning, Nathan placed the small wooden box on the table between them. "I'm not asking because of fear," he said, "or because it would be easier. I'm asking because every day I choose you." Clara opened the box herself. The ring caught the light, simple and worn. She did not hesitate. "I choose you too," she said. They married on a clear Sunday morning beneath a wide sky. No finery, no spectacle, just neighbors, shared vows, and hands clasped firmly against the wind. Eleanor Finch wept openly. Pastor Miller smiled like a man restored to faith. When Clara placed the ring on her finger, it fit as if it had been waiting. That night, the cabin felt different. Not fuller, but settled. They lay together in quiet understanding, the past acknowledged, without letting it rule them. Outside, the river moved on, carrying winter away. Months later, Clara stood at the cabin door, watching Nathan walk the fields. The land was changing, so were they. She knew now that love was not rescue or sacrifice. It was staying. It was building again after fire. Nathan turned back toward the cabin, toward her, and smiled. Home was no longer a place he guarded alone. It was a life they chose together. I hope you enjoyed this story. Subscribe to my channel so you don't miss touching stories. Leave a like and then comment below what you thought of the emotional stories. See you in the next video.